Good afternoon. I'm Ryan Alcantara with Rasier Career Services, and I'm joined by my colleague, Isabel Wright. Today, we are wrapping up our deep dive series with an exploration of Extended Opportunities Programs and Services, or EOPS, and Educational Opportunities Programs, or EOP. We have a panel today that includes Dr. Monica Demcho, offering a perspective from the community college system, and Janette Hyder with a university perspective. We will start today with an introduction of our two panelists and an opportunity for them to share information about EOPS and EOP and the nature of their work, providing some insights on their respective career journeys as well. And then we will open it up for questions from our participants. So let's go ahead and get started, and we'll begin with Janette Hyder.
I want to, thank you for inviting me, Ryan, to attend today. I'm very excited to be able to share some words of wisdom and my life journey and perspectives, and also the role that I had played in EOP. So a little bit about myself, like Brian mentioned, I am first gen. I'm a working professional at Cal State University Fullerton. I have two children that are both in high school. And I attended I attended USC full time too as a student. I did walk in May, so I'm wrapping up my last two chapters, chapter 4 and 5, to hopefully be officially done soon. I'm really looking forward to that. In addition to that, I've always been really, really active in the community, both on and off campus. I'm also the president of my union here at Cal State University Fullerton. I've been the president for about 25 years, I would say. So not only do I advocate for students, I also advocate for employee rights. In my current role at Cal State Fullerton, my role is to help men of color graduate from the institution and prepare them for professional or graduate school or the workforce. And so it's a small community that I work with, but it's definitely very, very inspiring to be able to support men of color to help them to the next level of their goals and journey in life.
Wonderful. And I see Monica has joined us as well. And so we'll take a little bit of a pause here. And I'll go ahead and introduce Monica as well. Pull up my document. Welcome, Monica.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Dr. Monica Demcho is an educational leader with over 15 years of experience in student success and equity initiatives, counseling and teaching. Currently, she serves as the Extended Opportunity Programs and Services and CalWorks faculty coordinator at San Diego Miramar College. Her experience includes roles in residential life, career development, program development, and management and retention initiatives, providing her with a comprehensive understanding of the student life cycle and support needs. Dr. Demcho holds a doctorate of education in educational leadership from USC, complementing her master's in counseling and dual bachelor's degrees in psychology and human development. Dr. Demcho is actively involved in numerous institutional committees and professional organizations, contributing her expertise to shape policies and practices that enhance student outcomes. Born and raised in Bolivia until she was almost a teenager, she brings a bicultural perspective to her work, consistently advocating for equity and inclusion in higher education. Welcome, Monica. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you.
So I will invite you to provide a little bit more background on yourself and your role in working with EOPS at the community college.
Absolutely. Let me see. So let me start with kind of how I got here. I got a master's in counseling with an emphasis in career development, and worked in career services at Pomona College and then Cal State San Marcos for maybe maybe about 5 years in that role. And then when I was at Cal State San Marcos, I became very interested and involved in student retention issues. Cal State San Marcos at that time had one of the lowest retention rates within the CSU system. And they ended up creating a position for a retention coordinator, which I interviewed for. However, I didn't get the role at that point. And I decided that being in career services, I was kind of in a very niche area, and I wanted to expand, broaden my experience and education. And so at that point, I decided to pursue the doctoral program at USC. So I completed that program in 2011, and throughout that program, I continued my interest in student retention and student success, and I focused my dissertation on HSIs and the retention of commuter students. So when I completed my doctoral degree, I started looking at opportunities to work in student success and student retention. And I'll go into more detail later on, but through informational interviewing, I ended up landing a position at a community college, and that was San Diego Mesa College. And I worked, because my experience was in career services, I started as a part-time, which we call adjunct, career services coordinator, and got involved in EOPS and was part of the advisory board. Really fell in love with EOPS. The goal of the program. As an undergraduate, I was part of the EOP program, and I decided that I wanted to work in EOPS. So worked my network, worked my connections, and was able to land an adjunct position as an EOPS counselor. And I worked there for a few years and then transitioned to an EOPS director positions for a few years later. If you're not familiar with EOPS in the community college, we are a cohort-based program. And we serve students who are economically and educationally disadvantaged. We provide services. We're at the very core, we're a counseling program with financial support in addition to the counseling services that we provide for students. So I have been a director, more in a management role at Mesa College. And then about 7 years ago, I transitioned to a faculty coordinator position here at Miramar College, and my roles are somewhat similar in terms of what I'm doing operationally, but distinct in that I was a manager before, and now I'm in a faculty position.
Great. Thank you so much, Monica. So I do want to kind of open it up, as we'll be opening up for questions. And so if any of our participants have questions, you can add it to the chat. But I do want to spend a little bit of time kind of digging into how EOP and EOPS programs operate. So let's, Janette, if you want to just share a little bit more background in terms of how the EOPS program operates at Cal State Fullerton specifically, but more generally at the 4-year. And then Monica, we'll have you talk a little bit more about how EOPS operates in the community college.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. So I am an EOP student. When I graduated from Southgate High, I came straight into Cal State Fullerton as an EOP exception admit, and I actually attended Summer Bridge, which is a summer program where you live on campus and you take summer classes to prepare you for the fall semester. And so the bulk of my career has been spent working in EOP. And so what we do at the 4-year, we admit about 2,000 students. We have about 2,000 students on the campus, and we have about 4 to 5 counselors. And it's a first gen, low income, underrepresented program. It is an admissions program. You have to apply when you're applying to attend the CSU. You do have to mark that you are interested in applying for EOP. And then there's an application process that you have to go through, and you have to also get kind of like 2 letters of rec that's on the application, and everything is submitted online. And then since it is an admissions program, it goes through evaluations like they do when they admit you to the institution. And so basically, EOP really changed my life. And if it wasn't for EOP, I probably wouldn't have the degrees that I have or be involved in higher education. And so that's why I love and I'm so passionate about giving back because EOP gave me the opportunity to dream. And, you know, like I said, accomplish the goals that I have accomplished so far. It is mandatory for the students to meet with their counselor in order for them to be able to register if they're first year or on academic notice, which was previously called like academic probation. If they qualify, students would receive an EOP grant at the institution. And that's all based on like the financial aid. They look at your overall package to see if you meet the income guidelines for the EOP grant. In addition to that, at the campus, they do have like workshops. They provide academic support, not only just the counseling, but also like study skill support. And students are assigned a peer here at Fullerton. And so it's you know, they have the peer mentoring program. Students also they do kind of like classes together, like a cohort model when they come in as first-time freshmen. They do student success classes to help them like with the English, math, if they didn't pass in the summertime. So the students are required to stay here in the summer if they're exception admit. So we have 2 type of student pools. We have students that are exception that maybe didn't meet the GPA requirement or maybe didn't do well in one of the classes like an English or a math, and EOP is giving them the opportunity to do well, you know, to do classes at the institution, and then they have to pass their classes. And then we have the regular admit students that they would get into Cal State Fullerton or any CSU regardless of, they meet all the full requirements for that. And most of the Cal States have an EOP program. So we are different from the community college. I know at the community college, they have a lot of extra little perks that we don't have. And sometimes that is like a shock for some of the students transferring in from the community college because they get bus pass, they get a lot of cool perks that unfortunately we don't have the funding for. But you're assigned a counselor and you're with that counselor until you graduate. So it's a very holistic program, and we're there to guide you and support you all the way through. So that's a little bit about how EOP works at the 4-year institution within the CSU.
Great, Janette. And just to clarify, so Fullerton has about 40,000 or so students total. How many are EOP students on an annual basis?
We're actually up to over 43,000 right now.
43,000. Okay.
Yeah, we're over 43. The goal is to admit typically 500 students a year.
Okay. And
Yeah,
so then you
that's
have
the
the
goal.
4 counselors working with about 125 or so.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the students after their first year, if they're a transfer or first-time freshmen, they're required to meet with their counselor. And after that, you're not required unless you're on academic notice, but you can always still meet your counselor even though
Sure.
it's required.
Great. Appreciate that. Monica, you want to talk a little bit more about EOPS in the community college?
Yeah, absolutely. So EOPS was born out of the civil rights movement. We had our 55th anniversary this year, which we're very proud of. It's considered a model program in the community college system. And when we look at the outcomes of our students, they tend to have higher GPAs, higher transfer, and higher completion rates compared to the general student population. So we call ourselves an over and above program. So basically, I like to explain it as we take our students from the driveway to the podium because we support students holistically. So in addition to the core counseling that we provide for our students, we provide the financial benefits. Our program has about 550 students in our cohort. EOPS is the umbrella program, and under EOPS, we have the CARE program, which supports single parents who are receiving cash aid. And we have Next Up program, which is the newest program. It's been around in the state for, I would say, about 7 years. And that program specifically supports foster youth. At the core of our program is the counseling. So students are required to come in and meet with our counselors 3 times during the semester. I would say that our student to counselor ratio is probably between 100 and 125 students per counselor. My office is comprised of 3 full-time counselors in addition to another 5 or so who are our adjunct counselors or part-time counselors. I think one of the neatest things about our program is that students really get to know their counselors, right? And so they develop that relationship. And when we do surveys to find out what are the students' needs, what are the benefits that they appreciate most, the counseling in that relation is something that tends to be really high. So we have a carrot to get students into our program, and that is the financial benefits, right? So students who are part of EOPS, we help them with a bus pass or a parking permit. We provide a book credit at the bookstore so we can support them with their book or access codes. In addition to that, depending on our funding, we're a state-funded program. The last 7 years, our funding has been very robust, and there's a lot of support at the state level for EOPS programs, so we've been lucky. So we provide grants anywhere from $100 to $300. Our CARE and Next Up programs, the grants are typically a little bit more than that. And we track our students very closely, right? So they have to submit a progress report halfway through the semester. I go through and review any students who have grades of D or F, and we communicate with those students. We bring them in for interventions. We have group community building is really important. And so we have workshops throughout the semester. We call them counseling group sessions to really build that sense of community. And we're seeing this year that students are eager to be back on campus, eager to connect. And so we're doing a lot of that community building. For our students, we are in the process of transitioning part of our office to a new location, which will allow us to have a space for students to gather, which we haven't had. So we're really excited to maybe do a peer mentoring program to support our students, because we know that connection to campus is super important. Trying to think if there's anything else about the program. And students need to meet eligibility, right? So they need to apply for the program. The application is fairly simple, and they fill out one application, and then we assess whether they're eligible for EOPS, Next Up, and CARE. Some of our students are in all 3 of our programs. My office is somewhat unique in that we also house CalWorks in our office. So we also assess whether students are eligible for our CalWorks program. And then I have lead counselors for EOPS, lead counselor for Next Up, and a lead counselor for CARE and CalWorks that sort of support all of the programming needs for those students to make sure that we are not only tracking them, but we are, as a holistic program, we're also really assessing basic needs and doing referrals as needed to make sure that our students are successful. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Monica. So we're going to transition to opening it up for questions. I encourage if you're in a space that permits you to turn on your camera, it'd be great to see your smiling faces. But regardless, if you have questions, feel free to raise your hand or add those to the chat. But I will go ahead and get started with a question for both our panelists. For students interested in entering into EOPS or EOP, what do you recommend that that they should be working on now to be competitive for those kinds of positions post-graduation?
Go ahead.
Okay. I knew that I wanted to be an EOP counselor. I was extremely passionate about giving back to the population that I came from. And so in my undergrad, I was a human service major. So I did my internships. I was very strategic about making sure that I had my internships that related to the EOP population that I wanted to serve. And I also got a job there. I was a peer mentor there. And when I got into my graduate program, I became a graduate assistant for the EOP program. So I strategically made sure that I had the background, that I had, I got paid for it, but then I also did volunteer work there as an intern. And then I was part of the student organization that EOP had. So I was very active in the EOP population. And I also would meet with the counselors there. I developed a rapport. I developed a rapport with the director so that they could see that I was very passionate about working with this population. And I just strategically tried my best to be active in the EOP community, attend. Sometimes they would have like little mini conferences. They would collaborate with other EOP campuses and students were able to attend. So I was able to attend that. And so I interviewed folks to see what I needed to do in order to try to get a position like an EOP counselor, because these positions are hard to come by, to be quite honest with you. People, if you get into an EOP counseling position, you typically don't leave your EOP position. And so that tells you how, people are just so committed. It's so rewarding to be with your students until they graduate. And to this day, I'm still very close to a lot of my EOP students through the years. So if you're interested in trying to become an EOP counselor, I would connect with the program director, connect with students, learn about the program, do some volunteer work, and maybe do some internships so that you can have that background, because you'll be competing with folks who are going to have that experience, and you definitely need to have counseling experience. So my degree is in marriage family therapy. And that also allows me to work at the community college because it's a MS in counseling. And so, you want to keep yourself as open as possible so that you can have different options.
Lots of actionable steps there, Janette. Thank you very much. Monica, what tips do you have?
So for a counseling position at the community college, you have to have a master's degree in counseling, clinical psychology, social work, rehabilitation. So you definitely need to have strong counseling skills. In addition to that, you have to have completed at least 9 semester units of college coursework related to ethnic minorities or people with language, social, or economic disadvantages, and then have to have 2 years of occupational experience working with ethnic minorities or people who are marginalized, underrepresented for the position. Getting into a community college counseling position is fairly competitive. We usually look for folks who've had at least a year of interning experience. And part of the reason is like the technical skills to counsel students tend to be, there's at least a 6-month learning curve. And part of it is that unlike a four-year university, you're advising students on the majors that are specific to the university. When you're working with community college students, you've got students who are maybe looking at any school in our area outside of the state. So you have to become familiar with transfer opportunities, not only at the regional level, at UC, CSUs, and also private schools. And one thing that the counselors will tell you, things are always changing, and you got to be familiar with general education requirements at the various institutions, as well as major prep. And students most of the time have multiple schools that they're applying for, and so it's fairly complex. And so most directors will not hire a counselor or an adjunct. And usually the process is you come in as an adjunct, you work part-time. Typically adjuncts will work at 2 or 3 institutions, anywhere from 15 to 20 hours at each institution. And then for a full-time position, the minimum I've seen is like a year or 2 of adjunct experience before you can move into what we call a contract position, which is a full-time counselor positions within the community college. Getting experience at the community college in networking in the community college that you're interested in pursuing adjunct opportunities for, I think it's key. You guys have probably heard of informational interviews. I highly recommend doing that. And because it is so competitive to get into the positions, my recommendation would be go and meet with, if you're interested in EOPS, I would say meet with the director or the coordinator at the EOPS at various EOPS offices in your area. And then other opportunities are, there's the general counseling, and then there are other programs that are cohort based. We have Emoja, there is Puente, and right now they're expanding they're trying to really focus on specialized populations. And so here we have a veterans counselor, we have a counselor who works with our Promise students, and there's a Promise grant that supports students through their first year. And so we have some Promise counselors. So there's a lot of opportunities, but definitely getting your foot in the door via an internship is really important in building your network of connections.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Monica. Appreciate and Janette, both on that background. So I want to, as we leave the door open for questions, again, just a reminder, and we'll put a message in the chat. We did a session on informational interviews. Strongly encourage that. Take advantage of your Trojan network for sure, but also digging into the relationships you have at your other alma maters. As Janette pointed out, you know, that history there, if you've got roots and ties, talking to folks at those institutions are helpful, but just connecting with other folks as well. Departments here on campus. For us here at USC, EOP operates under university relations. So again, if that's something that's of interest to you, then for sure building those connections. And Monica, for EOPS specifically in the community college, as you pointed out, like EC prepares you well for those kinds of roles, that counseling experience, but you have to be selective in the counseling experiences that you do for your internship, because they need to be they need to meet those minimum qualifications as you've posted, and thank you for including that. So all helpful information to know, and again, networking is really critical, and that's part of our interest in the deep dive series, is to expose our students to colleagues with USC ties, and we encourage you to take advantage of LinkedIn and other sources outside of these sessions too. To our panelists, what does a typical day look like for you as in an EOP role? And then kind of contrasting that, what is a non-typical day? What are the kind of the emergencies and crises you need to deal with?
I can talk a little bit. So my role is a little bit different in that now I'm the coordinator, so I oversee the program, but I can talk about a typical day for one of our counselors in our office. And I have some of our contract counselors focus on the majority of their time spent seeing students. And I'm probably 20 hours a week are spent on student contact. Appointments can be our brand new students tend to see our counselors for 1-hour appointments. Our continuing students, because we see students 3 times during the semester, our continuing students typically have half-hour appointments. So their day will typically start with admin time just to catch up on email, followed by several either 1-hour or half-hour appointments. Our first appointment is really focused on doing an intake, understanding where the student is, and starting to talk about their academic plan. EOPS is required to have a full comprehensive plan, which means from day one until the day they graduate, the classes that we recommend the student takes, and we have to have that plan within a year of the student starting in our program. And so counselors in the first session, we'll start talking about what are the students' goals, where do they see in terms of career, are they looking at transfer, are they looking at a certificate, an associate's degree. We also find that our students in the counseling, the holistic counseling is so important because our students, the majority of them, are dealing with other challenges. So it's not, they come in to see a counselor expecting to talk about academic, but we have a lot of students who are facing housing insecurities, food insecurities, mental health. So we see a lot of the conversations that end up veering away from, oh, what classes are you going to take, to how can we talk about the needs that you have today, because if you don't have a roof over your head, or if you're not getting a meal, then we actually have snacks all over our office. Our counselors have snacks in their offices because we know that students come in and sometimes they haven't eaten for 1 or 2 days, or some students are sleeping in their car. And so we really address that first, right? Making sure that students are getting the referrals and the support that they need, and then start focusing on more of the academic counseling. Going back to the schedule, after seeing some students, contract faculty are also required to be involved at the institutional level. And so typically our counselors are part of 1 or 2 institutional level committees. We have counselors who are part of our diversity committee in our office. We have a counselor who's really involved with the honors program on our campus. We have a counselor who's involved with the basic needs committee. And so we try to find committees that really affect our students, right? So we have a voice in those committees. So involvement at the institutional level is really expected of our full-time faculty. When you're in a full-time faculty lead position, there's also some programming expectations, right? So you may be planning events and workshops for the students. You're also tracking retention. For example, if you're the lead for our Next Step program that works with foster youth, or our care program that works with single parents, you're meeting with the students, but you're also tracking retention. You're tracking to make sure that students are coming in for their 3 appointments. You may be on the phone calling students if they haven't come in to check in on them. So there's a lot of that, just very closely following up with students. And some of those programs are smaller programs. The ratios are smaller, student to counselor. So our Next Step program, we probably have 1 counselor to about 40 students. Our care program and our CalWorks program is about 1 to 50 students. And so there's a lot of follow-up that happens. I would say that our Next Step counselors are probably in touch with our students sometimes 2-3 times a month. So there's a lot of that, just making sure students are getting their needs met. I think that's probably a typical day for a counselor in an EOPS program.
Thank you, Monica. How about from your perspective, Janette?
Okay, so typically, what happens, each counselor is assigned a caseload of students and they track them. And so the counselors will send out electronic messages to the students to make their monthly appointments, since they are required to see them on a monthly basis. So the counselors will typically see EOP students between 9 and 4. And in between, we'll take a lunch in between there. And the appointments, if they're a first year, their first intake appointment or a transfer student, that appointment is an hour long. After your 1 hour intake appointment, then when the semester starts, your appointments are 30 minutes long, to be able to see, you know, the students on the monthly basis. So a counselor will probably do counseling, probably see 6 to 7 students a day, I would say. And then they have to take case notes and document everything. Documentation is very, very important, especially because students are coming in theory, right, to see their academic counselor. But typically, sometimes if a student is not doing well in their classes, it's not because they're not good students, it's because life is happening to them. We have had a lot of students who are homeless, who is very similar to the EOPS student, I would say. At the community college, we have students who, you know, who have food insecurities, who are homeless, who are dealing with mental health issues, who need jobs. And so the counselors have to kind of probe sometimes to find out if, why are they not doing well in their classes. They do give out grade cards, but around midterm time, the students have to submit 2 grade cards to make sure they're doing well. And so the counselors will meet with their students for about 30 minutes, document, and then move on. And then about once or twice a month, there'll be academic workshops or support service workshops that the counselors will put on for the students. And so documentation is very, very important. A non-traditional day would be if a student is in crisis, where we would have to stop. Like sometimes I've walked students over to our counseling and psychological services a few times. Sometimes we've had to deal with like date rape issues if the student discloses. So it's not really just academics, it's a lot of the personal, and that's why having that counseling background is so critical, because you need that training. Even though that's not your job, you'll need to be able to how to handle that situation. So we work very closely with CAPS. Sometimes we have to work with the police department, depending on the situation that the student has reported. I know that I have dealt with suicide ideations with students where we have to, get different campus partners involved and your supervisor to do next steps. So there's really not like, it's not like every day is not the same. Like every 30 minutes is not the same. And so you just never know when a student walks in, what they're walking in with, what is on their mind, what is it, the obstacle that they're dealing with at that time. And so typically it's really not a typical day. It's hard to kind of say, like, I guess a good day would be like you get through all your students and you document. That's like, wow, but that 9 times out of 10 does not happen. There's always like the ebb and flow that just happens, and you just got to roll with the punches, and I think the fact that EOP's perspective is looking at the student holistically is truly an advantage. There is no clerical counting. There is no checklist. It's really the nitty-gritty, getting to know your student on a like intimate level. You're counseling the student, but you're really counseling the familia. Because when you're working with this population, you get the whole family and everything that comes with it. So a typical day, it's by the seat of your pants, and you just got to learn to be very flexible, because every student that comes in is so different. There's not one student that's alike. So that's what I would say.
Good. Yeah, and I do want to talk a little bit about some of those challenges that are in your roles. What I'm hearing, and based on my experience, it's the ability to respond to support students as life gets in the way of their academic progress. Um, and so I welcome kind of more comments on that. Again, welcome questions from our students here as well. But I want to get to the point, and Janette, you certainly touched on this, and Monica as well. The partners you have, right? You can't, as an EOP or EOPS counselor, navigate this for students. Part of your responsibility is making sure students are connected with resources across campus, that you understand what those resources are, potentially talking to faculty or talking to colleagues in the financial aid office. Um, I want to kind of take you back when you were starting in your roles or from a perspective of a new EOPS or EOP counselor, how do you begin that process of building those relationships? And I'll say maybe even particularly if you're not at a campus that you were a student at, what recommendations do you have to a new professional in the space to just develop that Rolodex? I'm sorry to use a really old term, of folks that you would contact when you have that student that is dealing with a crisis.
Um, so we rely very heavily on other areas, not only internally in our campus, but also, especially with our care and next up students, we do a lot of work with some community organizations to help support those students. And I think my recommendation when I first started in my adjunct role at EOPS as a counselor, I went and introduced myself. We work very closely with the financial aid office, right? Because if the students are not getting their financial aid, then we're going to lose them. So I went and introduced myself to some of the financial aid technicians, as well as the director of financial aid, so that I'm a new counselor. And I just wanted to meet you and let you know that, I may have to, there's a learning curve for me, so I may have to come and ask questions. Same thing with our basic needs, right? We have a basic needs coordinator on our campus. So every time I have a new counselor come in, I make sure that I introduce them to the basic needs counselor, because we rely on them heavily. Mental health, we not only go over and introduce ourselves to our mental health counselor, but we also bring them into our department meetings to provide updates, as well as let us know what is some of the programming. We try to collaborate with them. We have a parenting group for our care students, and we collaborate with mental health to support the parenting group. So I would say a combination of going and introducing yourself to some of the key players on campus, as well as doing collaborating in workshops or events for students, because then they really get to know your students. EOPS is required to do an advisory board meeting once a year, and CARE does it twice a year. And so we are very thoughtful about which partners we're going to invite to the advisory board meeting, because that's such a great opportunity for them to understand the work that we do and also get to know some of our students. So once again, I think it goes back to that networking and creating opportunities to meet the folks that are on campus that are going to benefit your students, as well as with external partners. That takes being resourceful, because if you're in a new position, sometimes especially if you're new to the region, it's going to take some exploration and some research to figure out, well, our students are really struggling, our foster youth are struggling with housing. So what are some of the YMCA or other regional support systems that we can help them to connect with housing, food banks? If you're working with CARE, you're going to be working with the county. And so just reaching out to people and in my opinion, going and meeting them in person, I think goes a really long way. So I always encourage when I hire new counselors to go and connect with folks in person to develop those relationships because they ultimately help our students. I hope I answered that question.
Yes, definitely. Thank you, Monica. Janette, do you have something you want to add?
I would say, as like if you're the new person on, in the department and brand new campus, I think one of the strategies, and I think Monica touched upon it, is I like to kind of scope out to see who are the players on the campus, and typically, like, I have connections in financial aid, admissions. Admissions is very, very critical and important. I can call people in housing. So be very strategic to try to reach out to those folks. I know that I volunteered a lot to, like, oh yeah, I'll be on that committee so that I can build allies. It's really about building bridges with folks on campus to help you reach the goal in supporting the students that you're trying to support. But I would say for me, financial aid and admissions is like huge. So I have them on my cell phone, speed dial them like, hey, I read this on their account. Like, how can we expedite this? So sometimes some coffee, let's do a coffee run. That's, I do like the little meet and greet. Like, hey, let's get out of the office and to build that community, but also be genuine about it, right? It's not about like just what can you do for me. You really want to build these positive relationships with folks, because at the end, we're here for the same reason. We want to help these students succeed. In regards to like being part of a special populations cluster, with counseling and psychological services, we typically have liaisons. Like I'm an MSI, and in MSI, we have our what do you call it? We have our um our own therapist that sees our students. And so special populations is very, it's kind of like to have that benefit because we work with underserved communities that we get a little extra with that. And so being able to call our therapist and let them know like, hey, I'm having a student in crisis versus like having to go through the line. So I would say build community, build relationships on campus, and take some time to do that meet and greet. And let's go for coffee, let's go for tea, or let's grab lunch. I know Ryan and I, when he was first came on board, I know that we went out to lunch just to build community, since we were going to have similar students that we were working with. So that would be my advice to you all.
Thank you. Thank you. And we've got a few minutes left here. I'm going to try to squeeze in a couple more questions, but again, welcome any questions from our students. One of the things, and we do a lot of emphasis of building equity. Educational equity is an important value that we have here at SC, and I think of it as kind of shaping equity warriors who will then go out and work in within education. And definitely these positions align to that kind of work. But what kind of challenges have you encountered in those issues of equity and power and privilege manifested in your work in supporting either your students or advocating for your programs?
I can go. I think because we are EOPs, like a special populations, and even within the Male Success Initiative Department, the first things that people want to do is, like, we're in a bad budget crisis, people want to cut special populations. And so that's why creating those bridges with not just on campus, creating those allies on campus, but also off campus is very critical. Like the senators, the legislators, who are creating policy, who vote on the funding. I wish we had the funding that the community college has, but unfortunately we're not that lucky. And so even though EOP is a mandated state protected program, one year one of the governors in California tried to redline take out the money for EOP, even though it's a state mandated program. And so we had to take students up to Sacramento, we had to lobby, and I was still working in EOP at that time. And it had the opposite effect because it brought the state together. All the EOPS programs and EOP programs at the state level, we all bonded because we were being attacked by this governor at that time who just did not care about EOP or EOPS. And so it really kind of united our voice for a common, a common reason in supporting, underrepresented college students who are low income. And so I think the challenges is that there can always be some type of like, oh, you're an EOP, so you're not. It's kind of like people like there. It's like a double-edged sword that you're an EOP and people look at you like you're less than. And so you have to constantly re-educate the campus community when there's a changing of the guard. When you have new administrators coming in, they need to have EOP at their, that needs to be at their top 5. You have to always constantly educate them. Let them know you have to tell your story in different ways, tell the student story in many different ways so that they do not forget. And so we don't have the luxury of just having, money thrown at us. We have to constantly fight, and you have to constantly be on, and you have to constantly make sure that you have your ties with the outside community and the inside community and your students, because this fight can't happen without the student voice. We do not have jobs if our students are not empowered, if they're not educated on the politics that are happening on your campus. You have to understand the politics of your campus, because if you don't, you're jeopardizing your program, you're jeopardizing your staff. It's real easy to move people around, move money around. So I say that you need to build those communities, be politically aware, and you can't, in these positions, you have to be vocal. And sometimes it's kind of lonely out there, but if you believe in the mission and you're doing the right thing, you have to take that stand and use your voice. You cannot be an advocate. You have to be an advocate in this position to work for these programs. Otherwise, you're jeopardizing your program if you don't use your voice.
Thank you, Janette. Monica, do you want to add?
So advocacy and visibility are super important for our programs. Because we serve a small portion of the student population on our campus, sometimes it's easy to ignore the EOPS program. However, it's very important. One of the things that our team has done really well is we become equity campus. Equity champions across the campus, right? And so we've strategically put our counselors and our classified professionals in committees across campus that really allow us to be a voice for our students. We do student profiles and we send them campus wide so that campus understands the needs of our students, right? And how to work with foster youth, how to work with students who are constantly dealing with food insecurity. And I think we are a voice for those students. And it's important for us to make sure that the campus understands that and finds value in that. So being very vocal, being very present, and being very visible it's part of our roles. And it's one of the things when I'm hiring counselors, it's like, is this a person who's going to be able to represent not only our office, but our students on campus, not just within our office, but also at the campus level. It's super important.
And that's a really good point. You have a lot of, I'd say, potential advocates out there in the campus community that just don't know how to support these students. So as you build those relationships, letting folks know how to do that. I would say the other aspect of this kind of political work is not going beyond the step of informational interviews, but finding mentors in those spaces, right? So they may be at your campus or they may be at other campuses to get that guidance, because you don't always know the political landmines, and understanding the history is sometimes helpful. So thinking of building deep relationships with folks that have been doing this work for a long time is oftentimes helpful. I've got one final question. I want to also just throw out and say a really huge thank you to Janette and Monica for joining us today. This has been really, really helpful to get your perspectives and insights into EOP and EOPS. What final kind of parting words, pieces of advice that you have for folks, and maybe it's something that you would have liked to hear earlier in your careers, starting in your roles, in addition to what you've already shared? Any final tips for folks that are early working within EOP?
I think my recommendation as a career development professional is getting as much exposure as you can while you're going through your master's program, right? So taking opportunity to do internships in various areas to kind of hone down what type of program, what type of population you're most interested in. Also exploring, when I was going through my master's program, I was very set on working in four-year universities. And it wasn't until I did the doctoral program at the CSU and I had some colleagues going who worked at the community college that I got exposure to the community college. And once I started working there, I found it to be one of the most rewarding positions. And I don't see myself changing out of the community college, working for the community college system. So just keeping an open mind and really exploring opportunities to figure out what's going to be a good fit with your skills and your strengths. It's super important. And once again, I can't reiterate the importance of doing, I think now they call them career conversations if they're, instead of informational interviews, but going and talking to professionals in the field to not only understand what it is that they're doing, but also to get a better understanding of how to get your foot in the door, because I think that's really important. And I think I mentioned a little bit, but I had no experience in the community college, and I emailed various VPs of student services across the San Diego region, and only one responded. But I went in, I did an informational interview with her, and my informational interview was not just learning, but also talking a little bit about myself and kind of where I saw myself going and how I would add value to the community college. And that opened the door for me to get an opportunity in the community college. So those would be my recommendations.
Thank you so much, Monica. How about you, Janette?
My last words of wisdom to you all is do not take no for an answer. Do not be scared to ask for help when you need it. And if somebody says no, find somebody else who will say yes, because that is important. I think being able to empower yourself to look for those folks who are going to support your vision, your mission, and your goals and your career trajectory, they're on that campus. You just got to find the right person. And it's okay. I know that in my graduate program, I kind of dealt a little bit with imposter syndrome. That's why mentorship is very important. So I say, don't take no for an answer. Find a mentor and believe that you deserve to be there. And that'll carry you far into your career trajectory.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you again so much. I appreciate Janette and Monica, you sharing your time and insights. Always a pleasure to have alumni just connecting and exposing our students to alumni. So again, thank you very much. Fight on, everybody. And looking forward, if you've got questions, if you're interested in connecting, want to learn more about informational interviews, please reach out to Isabel and myself, and we're more than happy to guide you through that process.
Ryan, and if anybody wants to connect with me, feel free to give them my contact information.
Awesome. We'll do that. Thank you.
Same here.
Thank you.
Same here.
Thank you, Monica.
Thank
All
you.
right. It was nice
Bye
meeting
on,
y'all.
everybody.
Take care.
Right on.
Bye.